Surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Hello everyone, I'm Terry Ross. I am a game designer and a cute games historian, and I just turned 30.
It doesn't get better.
It was a tough birthday, but I came to accept some hard truths. I'm supposed to be a widely renowned game designer by now. Well, maybe you would be by now if you actually made some games. If I really do want to become a great game designer, there's no way around it. I've got to get better at programming. And programming isn't hard, but it does take a lot of work to learn. And the work is making dumb little girly games every day. Could be worse. My first game is about Moo Deng. Why? Because she's adorable. This game took a month to complete, and by that time most of the fervor around Moo Deng had died down. But when I started, that was around the time when Moo Deng was getting like so popular that tourists were going to the zoo that she was staying at and like throwing trash into her enclosure. Everyone was like, oh my god, this is the fall of civilization. And they were right. How fucking dare you touch my princess? In a way, because I'm interacting with this content, I'm almost like part of the problem, right? Everybody who is bringing Moo Deng to these sort of heights of popularity are making more people want to go there and bother her. But at the same time, we're having really interesting conversations about like zoos and conservation versus entertainment. Really interesting stuff. But anyway, I ended up with my very first concept, which was a kind of like a virtual pet sim where you as a zookeeper could take care of Moo Deng as a way to be like, look, you can't go in person and bother her, but like maybe there's some way in the virtual world that you can kind of live out this fantasy of spending time with this animal, enjoying her presence while also letting the real Moo Deng live in peace. In making this game, I also learned a lot of interesting stories about the zoo in Thailand where Moo Deng is living. There are these monkeys that are jumping around everywhere, and apparently in Thailand, that's just like a normal thing. There's just like fucking monkeys out there everywhere. They're like squirrels or rabbits here in the United States, except that they're monkeys. And the monkeys get into the zoo enclosures and they cause all this kind of mischief and they try to steal food. So I was like, oh, I'll make some monkeys. I'll put that in the game. Won't that be interesting? The monkeys, in fact, did not make it into the final game, but I think it's worth mentioning because, that's just a fucking crazy story from someone who just doesn't see monkeys in the wild. I also noticed, this was personally very funny to me, in every single video that shows Moo Deng, she's up to her antics, her mom is also in the background. Moo Deng's mom, can I say this, is always eating a meal. I've not seen a single piece of video footage when she's not chowing down on something. Mama Moo Deng is getting hers, okay? A bitch hungry. And so I have to respect that. I have to pay homage to that. We also have to pay homage. Remember, Moo Deng didn't come from anywhere. She came from this iconic mother. I think it's just worth putting her in the game somehow. In the end, a lot of my planned features had to get cut because, remember, I'm just making these small games in order to keep my programming experience going. But I really like the idea of using pop culture as like game design inspiration because it does really push you to focus on making the games quickly, like within a reasonable amount of time, because you want them to stay current. And Moo Deng's story is just like such an interesting and weird one that it really inspired a lot of like funny game design choices. I like making games in pixel art. Pixel art is a really good way to just like limit the amount of artwork that I put in the game, and it helps me kind of focus on programming rather than art because I always like to distract myself by focusing on the art. So pixel art is kind of a good way to mitigate that, and it is really fun. And I like using these sort of restrained color palettes and these restrained resolutions. I'm using a palette that I'm experimenting with here that I call Poly. I pulled a lot of the colors from the Polly Pocket Garden Surprise clamshell. It uses this really beautiful split complementary color scheme, so there's like a lot of purples and yellows in it, and it feels very like plasticky and girly in a way that I can't describe. Surprisingly, isn't that hard to work with. Spoiler alert, making palettes is actually really freaking difficult and super easy to mess up because I have messed it up many times before in the past, but this is turning out okay, so I may actually tweak it and drop it on low spec. We'll see. Art-wise, the thing that probably took me the most time was the background. After the background was done, I made a bunch of tourists. I made a monkey animation, which didn't end up in the game, but I think it's worth showing off here. I also made Moo Deng's mom, her little chewing animation because she's always eating. And of course I made Moo Deng. I think it's easy to make pixel art that's just like about whatever, but when you're trying to like sort of boil down the essence of something that's in real life, like Moo Deng is a real animal and like her personality and the way she looks is very distinct, and trying to boil that down into teeny tiny pixel art is incredibly challenging, but I think I did okay. Doesn't look that bad to me. Let me know what you guys think if I captured Moo Deng. This sprite didn't make it into the final game, but I am very proud of it and I need everybody to look at this. Moo Deng. Moo Deng. Okay, moving on. It is now finally time to program. I'm using GameMaker because I really like GameMaker. It's a really solid 2D game engine. I've been using it for a really long time, and I don't really want to learn Godot. I would say the theme of this game's coding, if I had to like give it like a theme, is bounce. I once played this game called Disco Zoo. I think it was called Disco Zoo. It was on mobile, and I thought it was so fascinating. All of the sprites were static pixel sprites, just these teeny tiny little static pixel sprites, and all of the movement and the life that was brought into all of the sprites was programmatically added. So it was like squash and stretch and bounce and making everybody move around. So I thought I would try it out, and the results were so much better than I could have ever anticipated. Like, look at that. That is just two sprites, the front sprite and the back sprite. All of the other life and the movement was added programmatically. Like, that is so cool. Guys, coding is cool. Controversial opinion, coding is cool. I'm gonna take a moment to shout out a real classy lady, okay? Big sister feminist ally energy. A real girl's girl, if you will. I would not have been able to make this game without her. And I'm talking about the sign function. Oh my god. The doors that this bitch has opened for me, like, I'm not even playing, like, give her her flowers. And I don't want to go on about the failures of the American education system again, but I would have paid so much more attention in calculus if my teacher had just explained to me that all of these dumb squiggles that were on the Texas instrument would actually allow me in the future to create a juicy, plump, Moo Deng bouncing ass. That would have been like a life-changing piece of information, and yes, somehow it was left off of the curriculum. Where would I be now if I had only known that this would be applicable knowledge later on in my life? Probably a millionaire. I have to say, I did work on this game for about a month. I had to take a couple of breaks in between because I went to Madrid. But when I got back, I would say about 80% of the game was made within the span of 3 days. Something happened which allowed me to sort of like just enter a flow state. I was locked in, as the children say. One of the things that really helped me when I was in this like super productive period of time was that anytime I would run into a problem that was like really slowing me down and I was taking like several hours or days to try and solve it, I gave myself permission to just sort of simplify the problem and move on. So for example, in the beginning, I was having a really hard time trying to program this one button. I was trying to get like the click function for it to work, and I was diving into GameMaker's like GUI documentation because in GameMaker, like the GUI layer and the game layer are different and they have like different functions that control them. And I was spending like hours and hours on this problem, and I was like, wait a minute, there's only one button in the game. Why am I spending so much time trying to figure out this one thing when it's literally only going to be used once? So I just changed it so that you can click anywhere on the screen to move on to the next screen, and we're not spending all this time just focusing on one button. Like, I will learn about GUI later. The important thing was for me to keep programming and work on the meat of the game, which was like Moo Deng moving around and all this other stuff. Someday I am going to make a video about this because I think it's really important. I think it's something that a lot of first-time game designers misunderstand about like how to get good at programming and how to make good games. But that's not the subject of this. This is a devlog, so we're going to get back to that. Sorry I rambled. I'm just really into my own learning journey. What can I say? I want to keep doing like ASMR stuff. If you have nails, how do you guys like not do ASMR stuff all the time? This clickety clackety shit is so addicting. I'm getting distracted. Alright, so let's talk about the finished game. It's really, really easy. The only thing that happens is Moo Deng meanders around her little enclosure. There she goes. I programmed her with really simple behavior where she just kind of picks a spot on the map and walks to it, and sometimes she stops and hangs out. And then there's these tourists that spawn at the bottom. They will walk across the bottom of the screen and they will throw trash into the enclosure, and you can catch the trash in midair. You can also pick it up when it lands, and you put it in that trash bin there. And if you put trash in the trash bin, you get 100 points. And if Moo Deng touches a piece of trash, the game is over. Like, you're done. She's died. She didn't actually die, but she's very dramatic, so she's pretending that she's died. I'm so proud of the animations in this, the programmatic animations. And aside from all of the bouncy stuff that I added, a couple of extra things that I finally learned for the first time was I made a game with sound. That's a first for me personally. And I also learned how to export in Game Maker into HTML. So now all of my games can be embedded on Itch.io, and you can just play them in the browser, which I think is really cool. So if you are watching this video on YouTube, the link to the game is in the description. If you're watching this video on Itch.io, the game is currently right above you in the browser and you can play it. My personal best score is 1900 points. That is the developer's personal score, so let me know in the comments if you managed to beat it or if you found any bugs. The only bug that I know of is sometimes when Moo Deng touches a piece of trash in the game and she'll just like freeze. That's what she's supposed to do. But sometimes she'll just start randomly like listing off to the side. I didn't end up fixing it because I didn't have time, and also I just thought it was really funny. Which I think a lot of us can relate to. Like, sometimes something so horrible happens that you just have to phase into an alternate plane of existence. And I think that's a very relatable thing. And so yeah, I'm really excited. This is the first game of many. I plan to keep doing this. I plan to keep becoming a better programmer and a game designer. And I hope that you guys will continue to watch me. And yeah, let's go ahead and make 2025 a really fun, girly, great year.
Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.